Hello, welcome to Do It Yourself with Wayne. Today we're going to do a product review on this Rilon Mig Welder. It's model number MIG 135E, and it's mostly intended for the hobbyist and the homeowners that just occasionally need something to weld. But we're going to start out by showing you what all came in the box. Then I'm going to talk about safety with welding. Then we'll talk about how to load the wire to get it started. Then we'll demonstrate some welding. And then finally, I'll give you my final review. There'll also be hints and tips along the way, so make sure you watch the entire video. So anyway, let's start with what's in the box. This is the box that the welder came in, and it was packaged very well. There's almost no chance this thing would get damaged in shipping. But anyway, I got all the parts out of the box. This is the welder unit itself. We'll be showing how that works in just a little bit. Has the cable that the wire goes through for actually welding. It's permanently attached. Has your ground cable that's permanently attached. Has a power cable that is not permanently attached, and that's basically the same kind of connector that you'll have on the back of most PCs and your monitors or at your desk. Pardon me. Comes with a strap that goes through here if you choose to use it. I haven't put it on because I don't think I need it, but it is there if you want it. Comes with an extra tip that replaces this pink one if you need it. And it also comes with this little brush, this wire brush on this end, little thing on this end for pecking your extra residue and flakes and stuff off your weld. And it also comes with a spool of wire. And this wire is 0.8 millimeters. Flux core has the flux gases inside the wire, which is what this welder uses, so that comes with it. And it has a user manual. Folks, I know you hate reading these things, but always read the user's manual, particularly the how-to, the cautions, the warnings. I know that stuff is boring. Sometimes you'll get an owner's manual and you can't even understand some of what they write. But read it anyway, because you may come across something you didn't know that'll make the difference between you or someone or something getting hurt or damaged because you didn't know it. Always read the owner's manual. So anyway, that's what's in the box. Now let's move on to safety. Now for safety, the first thing you've got to do, and this is 100% mandatory, you've got to have a welding mask. There's a lot of different types on the market. The cheaper ones will protect your eyes, but they don't automatically darken when you're looking through the lens. The first one that I bought did not automatically darken, and as I tried welding stuff, I realized that just wasn't the right mask for me. I took it back, I returned it, I got one that automatically darkens. And if you don't have one that automatically darkens, you got to have your mask up like this when you get ready to weld, and then you got to pull it down so you can weld. And when you start welding, the arc that this thing makes illuminates the area where you can see what you're welding, but as soon as that arc stops, you can't see anything. You got to push the lid back up so you can see what you just did or see where you're at to get started again. With the auto darkening mask like this, I can actually read the warning label on the top of this through the mask. But as soon as I start welding, it darkens down to protect my eyes. So that's the first thing you got to do. Make sure you got a welding mask, whether you go with the type that self-darkens or the type that doesn't. It doesn't matter, just make sure you got one. All right, we'll take this thing off. The next thing you need is gloves. You don't have to have gloves, but after you weld a little bit, you're gonna realize I need gloves. I would suggest some good leather welder's gloves that come up your arm a ways, because the sparks from this thing, I mean, it's hot metal and it'll burn you. Make sure you got a good pair of gloves. I would suggest long sleeve shirt, long pants, shoes. I've actually got a pair of tennis shoes that have the mesh net on the, or fabric on the top that actually has a hole burned in it. where a hot spark hit the top of my shoe and burned a hole in it. If I didn't have my shoes on, it would have been my foot that got burned. Make sure you wear clothes that don't burn easily. You know, don't wear polyester, don't wear anything that's nylon. Cotton is a good choice. It doesn't burn easily. So make sure you've got your body protected as well as your eyes from burns and things of that nature. So that's about it for safety. If you know of anything I missed, please put it in the comments, because I'm not a professional welder. I just do a little welding here and there. And I'm always looking for new tips and advice. So if you know of something I missed, let me know. Now, let's move on to loading the wire and getting ready to do some welding. After my neighbor finishes mowing his yard. I like my neighbor, he's a good guy, but he's getting ready to mow. Now let's install the wire and get this thing ready to weld. Obviously this is a side panel, a little latch here, you just push down, it'll open up. And this is where you put the wire on this spool. The first thing we're going to do is pull this clip out, just lay it to the side for now. And your spool of wire, I've already taken the plastic off of it. There's also be paper around here, I've taken that off. And the wire goes through one of these little holes, and that helps keep it from unwinding on the spool. So leave it there, but you want it on here so that the wire comes around the spool and off the bottom into this. If you come off the top, it's not going to feed well. So make sure that the wire is wrapped in such a way that it'll come around this way. So I'm going to put the spool on there. And then I'm going to put this little pin back in place. Like that. Now, that's all you got to do for installing the spool itself. But to load the machine, you get your little piece of wire and try not to lose control of it, because this thing's going to want to spin and get your wire loose. You want to cut the end of the wire so that it's nice and smooth. If this is crooked, if it's bent, it's not going to feed well. It needs to be good and straight. Loosen this knob, flip that down, flip this up, and right here, the little thing right there is a little bit flexible. You want to feed the wire into that hole. It'll come in through here, past this little feed roller, and there's a little plug right down in there. I don't know if you can see it, but that's where you want it to go. Now you may need a pair of needle nose pliers or something to kind of feed it in there, but it's got to go in that little hole down there. Obviously I'm having a little bit of trouble getting it down there because I don't want to bend the wire. All right, now I got it in there. So it's already in. Maybe you can see the blue there a little bit. It's already fed into that. So I'll push this down, push this up, tighten this knob. And this comes pretty much pre-adjusted for where you need to be. So just snug this up. Don't try to tighten it real tight, just snug it up. And at that point, your welding wire is fed in and ready to go. Now the next thing you need to do is get the wire fed all the way through all of this. And it takes a little bit. First thing you do is plug your machine in, and I would warn you, anytime you're doing something in here, I've got mine open so you can see what it's doing, but anytime you're working in here or with your nozzle, always unplug it, just for safety. But right now I've got it plugged in. I'm going to turn the knob to the just till it clicks that it's on to the lowest setting, and I'm going to feed the wire through really slow. And I'm going to time this because it's going to take a little bit. Let's see, get my timer started here. Start. Mash the button, and you can see it starts running. Now I'm going to cut most of this out, but I'm going to time it and see how long it takes. Okay, there it is. You saw the wire come out the end. I would warn you not to touch that with this thing turned on like I just did, and I just turned it back off, but when you pull the trigger, that piece of wire is hot with electricity. Be careful you never touch that. That's a safety thing. That metal wire is what's going to send electricity to what you're welding. It's going to make all those arcs. There's a lot of electricity there Don't ever touch that if this thing's on. It's always best if you need to do anything out here, unplug the machine. That's my safety tip there. Always unplug it just to be sure. You can turn it off. That makes it safe, but extra safe, unplug it. So that's how you get to plug the wire through. Cut it off so that it's about sticking out about 3/8 of an inch. That might be a little bit more than that, but not much. But cut it off at about 3/8, and that's where you start. Now here I'm going to demonstrate one of the challenges of doing videos for YouTube. As you can see, I did some welding here. I didn't have my microphone on when I did all that. So I'm going to show you again, kind of basically. This is a real rusty old pipe. I got my ground wire clipped on over here where it's really rusty. I turned my welder on, turned it up all the way. When I turned it up all the way, you can see where it burned through when I actually did weld. But with all that rust on there, this is what happens. You see that? Nothing. Doesn't weld because all that rust is an insulator. Now I'm going to cut that long wire off. I ground down a little spot over here where my ground can go, so my ground will get a good connection to the metal pipe. I ground right here where the tip here will get through the rust, because rust is an insulator, like I said. Now I'm going to show you welding right here a little bit, but this is what I did earlier when my mic wasn't on. And there's what happens when you're welding too hot. It burns right through the metal. Now I'm going to turn this thing down a good bit, and I'm going to weld again right here at the end. Now, as you can see, I got a good weld there. Take my brush and brush it a little bit, get all the slag off. Depending, you may need to do this to break off some of the hard stuff. And then use your wire brush to clean it up. And you end up with a nice little weld there. But that's what happens if you got rust on something. It can insulate what you're trying to weld and it just won't work. And you need to get the weld or the rust off of where your ground is at, as well as where you're welding. And then if you're too hot, it'll burn through the metal like it did right there. And if you're good, you get a nice little weld like that. And one thing I will warn you, to be very careful. When you're welding metal like this, it gets really hot and it takes a lot longer to cool off than you might think. So, be real careful about handling something that you've welded. I mean, 5 minutes from now, that might still be hot enough to burn you and give you blisters. So just be aware that, it takes a lot longer to cool off than you might think. This is something else that I welded a little earlier. I did this bead right across here. It worked out really well, but I didn't have my microphone on, so I'm going to do it again. I'm going to come this way. So here we go. So there we go. We'll take our brush and clean that up a little bit. Now, a professional welder would think that wasn't so great, but for an amateur at home to repair something small, that's a really good weld. If you look at the back side, you can't see it too well, but I got heat penetration here. Maybe not as deep as it could be, but it's deep enough to hold. I beat this thing on my anvil earlier. It didn't break or come loose or anything, so I got a really good weld there. That's not going to give any trouble. Now, this is my last project that I'm going to weld for you, and this is actually something that needs to be repaired for my mom. You can see this is something that was made just to sell, but it's kind of cute sitting in the garden. and made out of all kinds of oddball pieces. I got rebar, regular metal. I got an old propane tank, some pipe fittings, wire brush up here, washers. But there was a hinge. It was supposed to be his beak, and it broke off. The weld broke. Well, my mom tried gluing it, so I got to get this glue off of here. So now I'm going to grind this thing down, get rid of the glue, get rid of the glue here, and I'm going to weld his beak back on, and we'll see how he looks when we're through. Okay, what I've done so far is this right in here, I ground it down to get the paint off of it. I also ground all that glue off, and I ground this part of the hinge, so hopefully it'll weld good. So I'm going to try and weld it right there. I'm probably going to have to tack it on the back where I can see it better. Yeah, that's not going to work. Those magnets are nice, but they don't always work. All right, I'm going to tack on the back, and hopefully it'll stay there. Well, I didn't get a good tack. Okay, it tacked on good that time. So now I'm going to weld across the front. I'm also going to weld so this thing doesn't do this. But anyway, that's the plan. Like, turn this thing around a little bit so you can see it while I'm working. Okay, I think you can see that. I'm going to tack or weld right across here. Now I'll turn around and do the same thing on the other side. We should get a good weld that way. I'll turn the heat up a little bit more because this square piece is really heavy metal. So I'm going to concentrate my weld over on this side because this is heavier, thicker metal than the hinge is. So I don't want to burn my hinge up, but I got to get a good weld on this part. So that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, looks like I missed the hinge. I'm going to go back in this area a little bit more. Okay, that's not a beautiful weld, but I think it'll do the job. So now I'm going to turn around and do a little bit on the back side. And I'll give this back to my mom so she can paint it, because she wants to paint it again. I told her I'd weld this first. All right, that should do it. Turn the welder off. Raise my mask up so I can see things better. Remember, this is still hot. Don't touch it. Now I could weld right in here, but I don't think it's necessary. I mean, it ain't gonna take much to hold this on. I think we're doing good right there. I think we got a good weld that's gonna last and keep this thing from falling apart for my mom. And a nail sticking up on my bench there. And the ear looks like he's trying to come off. That weld right there is broken on this side, so I'm going to grind that a little bit, tack that again, just to make it better. All righty. Put my gloves back on. Turn the welder back on, not quite so hot as before. And if you got something that's painted like this pipe right here, take your ground and do this a little bit. That tends to eat through the paint to get to the metal to get you a better connection there. And I'm not going to worry with that too much, just tack it a little better. Okay, there we go. You can see we got a little flame there from the paint burning. That's not unusual. Get the slag off of it. Brush it a little bit. And this thing should be ready for my mom to start painting it. I had a sandblaster I'd sandblast it for, but I don't have one, so maybe that'll be another project someday. So anyway, there we go. Little guy has his beak back on now. Now for my final review. I think he's cute, don't you? Oh, the welder. I really like this welder. I think it has performed well. Comes with your ground clamp, your welding part. I like the way it works. It functions well. The front only has one dial. I got another MIG welder, a little bit larger than this one, but you got two different dials, so you got to finagle them to get just right. This one you got one dial. Makes it a lot simpler to operate. Loading the wire on the inside, that was easy. Wasn't any big deal. Just take your time, be careful. You won't have any, you shouldn't have any trouble with that part. Plugs into a 110 volt outlet, 15 amp. So if you need to take your welder to a friend's house or a relative and weld a little something for them, you can do that because this thing doesn't require some special outlet. It's 220 volt, 50 amp or whatever. Plugs into a regular household outlet. So that's great. I would like to see this wire brush be a little bit better. It works. But I'd like to see it have more bristles and be a little sturdier, but it does work. It gets the job done. It just takes you a little longer than a better brush would do. A few things you might want to think about in addition to this. Definitely a welding mask, absolutely required. I know I harped on that a lot, but I got to because a welder can just about destroy your eyesight if you don't have a mask. Good pair of gloves, long sleeves, long pants, shoes. But some other things you might want to have, these little vice grips like this that kind of reach around, those are nice to have for certain things. You need a pair of wire cutters. Needle nose pliers aren't bad because sometimes this little wire coming out the end will get too long, you have to cut it off. These magnetic things that you can put on something that holds another piece of metal at a right angle, those are nice to have, not required, but they're nice. It's good to have a file. This is not exactly a good metal cutting file, it's more for woodworking. But a good metal cutting file is good to have if you need to get rid of some rust or paint or something. I sometimes use my angle grinder, but a file like that would work fine. And that's mostly it. I really don't have much negative to say about this little welder. Like I said, I do have another welder, a little bit larger than this, but not a lot. And in comparison, I'd say this one works just fine. I think my other one will weld steel a little bit thicker, but not a lot. But this one gets the job done, and that's what it's all about. So all in all, I would recommend it. There'll be a link in the description where you can purchase one. And there'll be other links to other things here that you may be interested in your welding. But anyway, I do recommend it. So I'd just like to say thank you for visiting. Do It Yourself with Wayne. We really appreciate you. If you would click like and subscribe to our channel and all those things. And if you have any comments, if I got something wrong, tell me in the comments. If you'd like to add something, add a comment. Don't be afraid to tell folks that view this video that there's better ways of doing things or different ways or something more you can do with it or whatever. Leave us a comment and tell us what you think of the video. So anyway, thanks for visiting DIY with Wayne, and we hope you have a great day.